He looked in the mirror, adjusting his collar one more time, and asked himself the question men rarely want to face. Why was he no longer desired by the woman he once loved? This wasn't about being lazy. He wasn't overweight. He wasn't some man without purpose. In fact, his life was on track. He had a stable career. He still pushed himself at the gym. He still pursued hobbies. He had style, charisma, and humor. By all external measures, he was the man women usually dreamed about. And yet, behind closed doors, he was living a truth that gnawed at him every single day. It wasn't just him. Thousands of men whispered the same frustration in online forums, private consultations, or quiet conversations with close friends. They were in marriages that had become void of passion, stuck in long-term relationships where intimacy was nothing but a distant memory. For many, it wasn't even once a week, not even once a month. Some men went 4, 5, even 6 weeks before the subject of sex even surfaced, only to be brushed aside like an afterthought. He remembered reading a message from a man in his early 30s, someone who had been with his wife since they were teenagers. They had a daughter, a home, the life most couples were supposed to dream of. And yet, behind the smiling photographs, their intimacy had all but vanished. Sex happened maybe once every month or so, and even then, it felt like a transaction. A chore to be scheduled, checked off, and forgotten. Afterward, his wife would roll over, sigh, and ask if he was finished so she could move on with her day. The words cut deeper than she realized. He had tried romance, tried vacations, tried humor, tried patience. He even took her and their little girl on a holiday to the islands for 2 full weeks. He planned, he provided, he celebrated his milestone 30th birthday, and yet, the bed remained cold. When he made a move, she resisted. When he flirted, she dismissed him. When he hinted at desire, she called it pressure. She even admitted that she often felt forced into it, that she had no natural urge for him anymore. And there it was, the invisible wall. How do you fight against something like that? How do you convince someone to want you when they no longer feel it? Do you surrender to a lifetime of 5 or 10 empty encounters a year? Do you accept that intimacy is gone forever? That love without desire is all that's left? The man sat alone in his office, staring at the ceiling, haunted by her words. Forced. That was how she described their intimacy. And in that moment, he realized something no husband wants to admit: desire cannot be negotiated. The question spread like wildfire across the minds of married men everywhere. How do I get my wife to want me again? How do I rekindle something that feels dead? And the truth was brutal. Sometimes, it wasn't just about her. Sometimes, it was about him. Because over time, most men change. The man you were when she fell for you is rarely the man you become a decade later. Back then, you were bold, exciting, unpredictable. You led with confidence, stood your ground, and had the energy of a man driven by ambition. Somewhere along the way, many men lose that edge. They grow comfortable. They grow soft. They stop saying no. They trade their identity for compliance. This silent process had a name, though few recognized it at first. It was the slow erosion of masculinity through 1,000 tiny concessions. Every little yes chipped away at the spark that once made her look at you with hunger. She tested boundaries. She asked for small changes. She wanted this done her way, then that. Over time, you stopped pushing back. You agreed, you adjusted, you complied, believing that harmony was the price of love. But women don't truly desire a man who bends to everything. They may say they do. They may praise kindness, compromise, cooperation, but in the shadows of their instincts, what they crave is strength. A man who never challenges, who never stands firm, who always obeys, becomes invisible to her desire. And so begins the quiet death of intimacy. Yet, the blame isn't only on him. There are women who undergo shifts beyond control, hormonal imbalances after childbirth, changes in their body chemistry, lingering depression, or even secret infidelity. Sometimes it is physical, sometimes emotional, sometimes simply the slow unraveling of attraction. But if a man has done his work, if he remains fit, driven, captivating, funny, stylish, and ambitious, and she still looks at him with cold indifference, the question becomes heavier. What then? Do you remain bound to vows that no longer nourish your soul? Do you continue chasing someone who has stopped chasing you? Or do you reclaim the truth that intimacy, in marriage, is not just optional, it is essential. He leaned back in his chair, recalling the countless stories he had heard from other men. Some buried their pain in silence, turning to the glowing screens of their computers at night, seeking relief through empty images and fantasy. Others stepped outside their marriages, sneaking into the arms of someone else, just to feel alive again, just to remember what it felt like to be wanted. Some confessed it was easier to pay for affection than to beg for it at home. But he knew deep down that none of those paths were solutions. They were distractions, temporary salves, on a wound that continued to bleed. What was really happening was bigger than one marriage, bigger than one man's frustration. It was a cultural pattern. Men were being conditioned to believe that if they only did more, gave more, agreed more, they would win back desire, fold the laundry, fix the cabinet, cook dinner, take the kids out so she can rest. And maybe, just maybe, there would be a reward waiting under the sheets at the end of the night. But that kind of sex, when it finally happened, carried no passion. It was transactional, a negotiated deal, a weary sigh followed by going through the motions. And no man, no matter how desperate, truly wants that kind of validation. Because real desire can't be bought. It can't be begged for. It can't be bartered through chores or therapy sessions. Real desire is raw. It is the look in her eyes when you step out of the shower, the way her hands linger on your chest without you asking, the urgency that says she cannot keep them off you, even if she tried. That is what men crave. And that, he realized, is what had vanished from his life. So the question became clearer. Not, how do I get my wife to sleep with me? But, why did her desire for me disappear and what must I do about it? He thought about the weight men often carry without noticing. Over the years, they put down the hockey stick, they quit the late-night soccer games, they trade energy for excuses. They pack on pounds, lose muscle, ignore ambition. They drown themselves in comfort, then wonder why the spark fades. And worse, they let her guide the rhythm of the relationship, allowing themselves to be molded into what she claims she wants, never realizing that each concession slowly erases the very man she once fell for. The truth is hard to face. Women test. They always test. Not maliciously, not even consciously, but instinctively. They push to see if you'll stand your ground. They push to feel the edge of your strength. When you give in every single time, you stop being the man she admired and start being the man she controls. And no woman burns with desire for a man she controls. So he made himself a promise. He would no longer negotiate desire. He would no longer live on his knees, begging for scraps of intimacy. If she wanted him, she would need to feel it again. Not through words, not through bargains, but through the undeniable pull of attraction. He understood now that leadership mattered. That a man must lead not only in his career, not only in finances, but in his relationship. Leadership wasn't about cruelty or dominance. It was about holding your ground, setting standards, and living a life so compelling that she either rose to meet it or risked being left behind. And if she refused, if even with his strength, his ambition, his discipline, she still withheld the one thing that bound their intimacy, then the path forward was clearer than ever. He would have to decide between two truths: stay in a cold marriage and wither, or walk away and reclaim his fire. He knew other men who faced the same choice. Some left, finding women who looked at them with hunger again, who laughed at their jokes and couldn't wait to feel their touch. Others stayed but lived double lives, carving out secret spaces to satisfy the ache their wives ignored. Many of those wives even tolerated it, so long as it never embarrassed them publicly. Across cultures and centuries, this arrangement had existed quietly, unspoken, yet understood. Intimacy must find its outlet somewhere, and if it was denied at home, it would be found elsewhere. But in his heart, he understood one truth above all: if genuine desire was gone, it could never be negotiated back. He thought of the men who had gone down the path of therapy, hoping a counselor's office could rekindle what was lost. Weeks turned into months, months into years, sitting in circles of blame and compromise. Some couples emerged with slightly more frequent sex, but it was never the fiery kind they craved. It was routine, mechanical, done out of obligation rather than passion. It was starfish sex, lifeless, detached, offered only to quiet complaints. Desire doesn't return because of painted walls, folded laundry, or shared therapy notes. Desire is not a checkbox, not an obligation, not a duty. It is something deeper, something organic. And if it doesn't live in her heart, no contract, no counselor, no chore list will create it. Real desire is messy. It is wild. It is the kind that makes her rush across town just to see you, even if it means losing sleep before work. It is the kind that pulls her into your arms without hesitation, that makes her bite her lip when you walk into the room. That kind of desire cannot be bargained for. It cannot be faked. And once a man understands that, he can no longer accept the counterfeit version. So he came to a conclusion. If she truly no longer wanted him, if her eyes no longer lit up, if her hands no longer reached for him, if her body no longer stirred, then he faced two choices. He could stay, resigning himself to a life of rejection and transactional affection, or he could walk away, untie the knot, and rebuild his future on his own terms. He understood that some men would never make that choice. Religion held them bound. Culture chained them down. Children complicated the decision. For those men, survival often meant living quietly, finding relief in secrecy or distraction. But for him, the truth was different. He refused to waste his years in a cage where love was cold and touch was absent. And so he reminded himself of a principle that too many men forget. You are not owned. Your body, your desire, your future, these do not belong to someone else by default. A wife may have first rights, but she does not own you. If she refuses to exercise that right, then you are left with a decision only you can make. Maybe she was struggling with things she never voiced, shifts in hormones, hidden depression, even private resentment. Maybe she was lost in her own storm, unable or unwilling to reach for him. But if she chose not to seek help, if she chose not to fight for intimacy, then the silence was its own answer. He knew he had to protect his fire. He had to stay lean, stay sharp, stay ambitious, stay magnetic, not for her, not to beg her back, but for himself. Because if the day came when he walked away, he needed to be ready, ready to rebuild, ready to step into new connections, ready to claim the life he refused to surrender. And so, he left one final message echoing in the minds of the men who heard his story. Never negotiate desire. Never trade your pride for pity. Never believe that folding more clothes or saying more yeses will make her want you again. If the fire is gone, you cannot breathe it back to life by begging. Either she desires you freely, or she does not desire you at all. And if she does not, you have a choice. Stay chained to cold sheets, or reclaim the life that reminds you what it means to burn. Take a moment to ask yourself, what would you choose? Would you live the rest of your years unloved, untouched, unseen? Or would you dare to step forward into a future where desire flows freely again? If you've lived this story, share your voice, share your lessons, because countless men are walking this same path, and your truth may be the key that helps them find theirs. The silence around sexless marriages must be broken, and it begins with men like you,